On the Africa room, North Sea biting, never bites. Fast with the women in the girls down with the guys. Spin now, see, black, you right, fight. OMG, Max Ford, Robin C, Gallon, Neck Night. Hot stove, talk, Robin C, bringing the hype. EC's alive, plus trust under those in my city life. Right? Queens got the dreams united. Under rag, Trump out, bring me stack. Night and under that chocolate flag. Smack that home out the park. Fucking deafening black. Side game time, Robin CP, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remains cheer in the orange, we unite. Match forever. I'm 50 in sight. Match pride and high. Energy like a live wire. Queen City chance. Passion never tires. Grand slam dreams and paces always fast. Holding it steady, cause we know we gonna last. We the kings of the field, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remain cheer in the orange, we unite. Match forever. I'm 50 in sight. All hearts ignite like NYC stars. Robin CP, guiding even do scars. Queens got the glow, city anthem flows.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to episode 30 of Mets Hot Stove for this offseason. A lot has happened early for the New York Mets, but nothing has happened lately. But we still have a ton of talk to talk about when it comes to our New York Mets. A lot of news over the last couple of days, a lot of rumors, a lot of different names, and a lot of back and forth with different reporters saying one thing and the other. And we got you covered throughout the show, guys. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channels. And Chris, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. So many reports, so much to go over, so much to decide on, to decipher. And it's tough, man, for us to come up on here and talk about this team and this organization and what could be running through their minds as they make these decisions. It's really tough. So we try to do our best in giving you all both sides of the fence, both, perspectives, all sorts of perspectives. And it's ultimately up to you all to make your own judgment call. But there's so many different routes that this team can go down, both pitching and with Pete Alonso. And we have a lot of reports to talk about. There's been a lot happening over the course of the last 36 hours, something of that nature. So let's get into it.
Yep. And of course, it has to start with the Pete Alonso saga. Once again, there's more news that came out. Again, what was it? Yesterday, it seemed like, according to Andy Martino, they were at the 10-yard line, Pete Alonso and the Blue Jays. It wasn't necessarily close to happening, but it's at the 10-yard line. A lot of things can happen with that. And, you heard Tim Healy, Andy Martino said similar things, that the Jays and Alonso are close to a deal. And then you had the same day, not a few hours later, not even, two Blue Jays reporters that are legit Blue Jays reporters came out and said the exact opposite, that it's not close, that it's not, at the finish line. And that was basically where it was left at. And then Andy Martino, right, a few hours after he tweeted that out, went on Baseball Night in New York and says, well, it's not that close, but, they're talking. So, again, I don't think anybody has a clue what's going on, to be quite honest with you. I think there's so many different leaks coming out from Boris, from teams now that are trying to get an edge on the price. Because, again, if the Blue Jays or any other team had a better deal than the New York Mets, Pete Alonso would have signed already. That's just my opinion, but it just seems like that. And, again, the Blue Jays, do they want him or do they not? I don't know. Again, we're still not really sure what they offered. Again, I still don't see how they will bring in Pete Alonso and everything's going to be fine and dandy when it comes to Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who they're trying to extend. And on top of that, everybody's like, well, he'll just move to third base, or they'll platoon and one day first base, one day DH. Like, do you realize these guys have really focused on their contract year and they don't want any changes that can hurt their overall price at the end of the season? Like, that's true. Yes, they want to probably win, but they're also looking at their payday as well. And to have all those changes and having the possibility of DH in one day, first base, third base, like Vladimir Guerrero is not going to want to do that. I don't care less what he says. And he hasn't really said much. And he says that he didn't want to play for third base, even though last year he said he would. The fact of the matter is, Pete Alonso's still a free agent. And other reports came out today that yesterday, Pete Alonso spoke with the Los Angeles Angels. And this is when all the craziness has happened with the Blue Jays. And he went to the Angels. You don't go to the Angels when the Blue Jays were supposed to be the team that was going to get you. That was going to be the team that was going to really be the competitor for the New York Mets if the Mets still have that offer on the table. So, Chris, I'm going to ask you. The saga continues, right? It was supposed to the Blue Jays supposed to have Pete Alonso already, and all of a sudden, he's talking to the Los Angeles Angels. And now, what do you think?
What I think is, I mean, we cannot go against the word of what Heyman said. You know, whether Heyman is in this situation the mouthpiece for Scott Boras, which it really does seem like that could be the case, given the conflicting reports that we've seen. It seems like this is a ploy from Scott Boras to get some more money on the table. Now, whether that's getting more money on the table from the Blue Jays or from the Mets or from both, you know, nobody knows at this point. I don't think that there's any serious consideration from Pete Alonso to go to Los Angeles. I would hope not, because at that point, all I would do at that point is just laugh. I mean, that's all that we could do. You know, if he's that desperate to get a fourth year from a team like the Angels and that's his end goal, then so be it. You know, that would presumably make it harder for him to go back out onto the market unless there's an opt-out after each single year. I think that it's going to be a 3-year deal, no matter if it's with the Mets or the Blue Jays, but maybe the Blue Jays go the extra mile and give him that fourth year, just like they did with Santander in that 5th year in the contract they just gave out over there. But I agree with you. I mean, I know Blue Jays want to believe that Vlad is okay going to third base. That's a position that he played before. There were some concerns there, and then they moved him over to first base. I'm just not inclined to believe that they bring in a guy like Pete Alonso, he takes over first base, and Vlad Jr. in a career or in a contract year is supposed to just be okay with that. Yes. I just thought it was also funny too, you know, Martino and Tim Healy going on record and stating that it's at the 10-yard line, and it made it seem like it was imminent. And then the credible Blue Jays reporters fought back on that, saying that they have heard absolutely nothing on that front of talks being that close. So this is a whole entire story at this point. It's a full cycle. We'll get into the first base trade targets that we have to get into just in case Pete Alonso goes elsewhere. You know, I'm going to say this first and foremost. I've been very optimistic about the Mets being able to achieve, you know, this contract extension with Pete Alonso this whole entire offseason. I don't take whatever happened yesterday in those reports, I take it with a grain of salt. But just from my own thinking process, I'm starting to believe that the Blue Jays could actually be, right, in serious consideration for this, like, and sooner than we all think. I'm starting to get that feeling, and it's not based on anything concrete, but it's just based on the fact that I do think they're going to trade Vlad Jr. at this point. If they are so serious about Pete Alonso, a Vlad Jr. trade, I'm just going to put this out there. It has to be on the table for them. And I don't think that Vlad Jr. wants to be in Toronto. We've been saying this time and time again. And if it gets to the point where they sign Pete Alonso and they are able to re-sign Vlad Jr. to an extension, then so be it. We were wrong. But I'm just going on this very wide limb here that the way that it's going to play out if Pete Alonso's in a Blue Jays uniform is that Vlad Jr. gets traded. So I'm not saying it's going to be to the Mets. I think that could be a little bit of a reach, which is why we're hearing the smoke surrounding one of these, you know, first base trade targets on the market. But yeah, Rob, my confidence level is slowly dwindling. I was at like 90-10 before. Now I'm at like 70-30. So that
the Mets
gives
to
you
sign
all a
Pete?
percentage ideal.
For the
70-30, confident that Pete Alonso comes back. So I still think he's coming back, but my confidence is just getting less and less and less. So
I still think that Pete Alonso is not going to have an offer he likes. Like, it has to be at least another year and between 20 to 23 million dollars. Like, is he going to take 4 years for less money? Like just to get that fourth year? Like, I just don't see him taking $2-3 million more for the same amount of years. I just don't see how that's beneficial. Even if he goes to Toronto, again, that is such a terrible situation. Like, what does that tell your star player? Let me ask everybody something. If Pete Alonso was in a contract year last year, like he was, and the Mets were looking to sign, let's say Vladimir Guerrero was the free agent, and everybody's like, oh, we should get Vladimir Guerrero Jr. If the shoe was on the other foot, you think the Mets would sign Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to upset Pete Alonso if it was a similar situation where he was the face of your franchise? Again, Pete Alonso isn't the face of the franchise anymore. Let's just make that clear. But let's say the way most Met fans act, like he actually is still, it's the same concept. People would be upset, like, oh, where are you going to move Pete Alonso, right? Pete Alonso said he could play third base. Well, you're not going to play third base. This is before Vientos, by the way. Let's say, oh, well, you can play Vlad one day at first, DH Alonso, go back and forth. How's that going to benefit the guy that's going to be a free agent? That's what I don't understand. Like, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., the Toronto Blue Jays had opportunities to leave him at third base at any moment over the last couple of seasons. Why haven't they done that? Because one, Vlad probably voiced his opinion. Yeah, he might say certain things to the media just to, to be respectful to the team that drafted him and everything like that, and not try to cause any issues and say, yeah, I played third base. But deep down, he knows it's a stupid decision. And some people said to me in the comments the other day that, oh, well, wouldn't that benefit him playing another position while other teams can be looking for a third baseman now? Yeah, but he's risking the fact that what if he plays bad at third base? What if his offensive numbers are down because he's at third base? And then you're putting a lesser of a defensive player in Pete Alonso at first base. Like, let's be honest, Vladimir Guerrero is better at first base than Pete Alonso. Again, we can look at the metrics, and that's a fact. Again, we're not just saying this. Teams see this. So he's going to not know exactly how good he's going to be at third base. I'm not saying if he's a little bit worse at third base than at first base, that is something that is going to hurt him in free agency. That's just the way it is. Like, we have to understand, like, Anthony Santander, the reason why the Blue Jays completely overpaid was because he fit that team perfectly like a glove. Pete Alonso doesn't fit them like a glove. And why would Pete Alonso, let me ask everybody this, do you really think they're going to play Pete Alonso at first base over Vlad to either DH him or play third base? They're not going to do that. And you think Pete Alonso is just going to take the fourth year? And even if he has that opt-out in the first year, just be a DH, he's going to be in the same boat next year with the same issues. Oh, well, he didn't play the field a lot. He's a year older, and who cares what he hits? Because if everybody believes that Toronto's not going to be good, he's going to be having numbers that might look good, but if you look at the underbelly of it, it was on a bad team. So here we go again with Pete Alonso being on a bad team in a bad season, having good numbers. And then everybody can talk about padding his stats. So it's the same concept. The fact is, Pete Alonso complained when he was a New York Met, he did not like the DH. He would DH more with Toronto on a daily basis than he would with probably the Angels or the Mets. So this is where we are right now. Like, I truly believe that if Toronto had a number and a year contract that Pete Alonso was just a little blown away with, say 4 years, 90 million, 95 million, whatever it is, something higher than the Mets boat an extra year. Wouldn't he signed already? Wouldn't yesterday Andy Martino and Tim Healy would have been right? And now we clearly know that he talked to the Angels yesterday, tells me that the Toronto reporters were correct. They were absolutely correct, because you don't leave the room and the conversation with Toronto if you thought it was that close at the 10-yard line. Clearly, he didn't like what he heard. So he's going to go to the Angels. And I think, and I'm going to put it out there, the Angels are more of a threat than the Toronto Blue Jays. And I said it before a couple of weeks ago on the hot stove. The reason why I say that is because, number one, the owner, Artie Moreno, hates Steve Cohen. That's number one. Number two, Artie Moreno spends stupid money on bad players in the sense of he would give them more just to show up somebody or just say, look what I did, right? We all know Pete Alonso going to the Angels aren't making them a playoff team. Like, let's be honest about that. You got a broken down Mike Trout. You got, I forgot one of their prospects. I think he's a catcher. That's pretty good. But other than that, what is Pete Alonso going to do? Right? Trout's going to get hurt at some point next year, like he always does. And then Pete Alonso is going to be the main guy. And then he's going to hit 40 bombs. Of course he is. Because there ain't going to be no fucking pressure. Everybody's going to say, well, the contract. Yeah, sure. So if you think that the contract is going to be the pressure again, he might have a good season because he's on a bad team with no pressure, just in the case that he's on a team that's not going to go anywhere. So, and you know what Met fans are going to do? He's going to hit 260. He's going to hit 40-plus bombs, 120 RBIs, and then Met fans are going to say, I told you so. But yet, he's on a bad team when they're out of it in June. Like, could we be a little bit more realistic when it comes to all of this? Because the fact of the matter is that Pete Alonso, the Mets want Pete Alonso. They still have the only offer to Pete Alonso. They offered him 3 deals over the last 2 seasons. He's took none of them and declined every one of them. What do you want the Mets to do? Offer 5 years just because Met fans are going to cry tomorrow on Saturday on the amazing day? Like, no. I'm sick and tired of saying, oh, you got to pay this guy because he's the face of the franchise. He's this, he's that. Stop it. The fact of the matter is the Mets offered him a fair value deal, a deal that's higher than Olsen and a few $1 million below Freeman. That's where he should be money-wise. There's no other team, maybe a 4th year, which I still said that a 4th year the Mets might go if I still believe until there's a threat that Pete Alonso's signing and has an offer, the Mets have no reason to jump. So I just don't understand it, Chris. Like, it's amazing to me that people are still blaming Stearns and the Mets when Pete Alonso turned down 3 offers over a year and a half with the Mets. And is this latest offer that we heard that Andy Martino went on Baseball Night in New York yesterday and says he heard that it wasn't just $68 to $70 million. It was closer to $75, $76 million. In that range, it was also deferred money in that as well with opt-outs. Pete Alonso didn't like the deferred money. So look at that. The Dodgers can defer every player they get, but all of a sudden the Mets try to do it, and Pete Alonso's like, no, I'm good. You see how that works?
I agree.
The player also has to agree.
I agree with you 100%. I will 100% back you up in that sentiment that, the Mets have been trying to do their due diligence in making this happen. I mean, it's kind of a bad look at this point, and not even talking about what happened last year with the contract extensions. I mean, if the sticking point was the AAV, if he doesn't like $23.3 million, all right. And then now the complaint is the deferments. I mean, the Mets just can't win.
Yeah. Exactly.
Are we really confident that if they went up to $25 million per, that he would even accept that, or he'd still try to drag this out?
I wouldn't even do it anymore, Chris. I would go get somebody else, whoever it might be, because I'm sick and tired of it. Right? Pete Alonso does not want to be a Met. Met fans get that 3-year hit. It's just a fact now.
We'll see how it plays out too, because it's interesting with this whole sort of situation. And you take a look at Bregman, who was one of the pivot points, and the teams that are interested in him. The Astros are still in on him and re-engaging in talks, and their offer still on the table. I have no doubt in my mind that the Mets' original offer is still on the table, that 3-year deal worth around $70 million, and with the deferments. I'm just curious in terms of what he's actually looking for. Does he want more AAV? Does he want 25 to 26? Or does he really, at the end of the day, want that 4th year? Like, what is more valuable to him?
I honestly think the Mets would be willing to give it with the deferments, with that opt-out for the first year, or even 2 years in a row. Like, I feel like they would do that. But again, why do they have to put a 4th year on the table when there still isn't an offer from the Blue Jays, the Angels, or another team? Like, that's the problem that I don't understand why people are getting upset about with the Mets and Stearns, because it doesn't make sense. Like, I'm sorry, there is no negotiation in any field of life where you're going to negotiate against yourself. It doesn't make sense. Like, why did Anthony Santander get that extra year and a little bit extra money and all those incentives from the Blue Jays? Because there was teams after him. Anthony Santander fits the Blue Jays more. That's why they needed to get him, because we talked about it last Hot Stove, right? Excuse me. Santander seemed like he was waiting in the wings for another team like the Mets or another team that was interested in him to maybe, come after him, because I don't think he wanted to go to Toronto, but it's hard to pass up that 5th year and all that extra money. So that's where it is, right? Clearly, Pete Alonso spoke to the Blue Jays. Clearly, either they offered him a similar contract than the Mets or less. Because why would he talk to the Angels if it was much more, another year, 4th year? Because if the Blue Jays give him the 4th year, wouldn't you think he would have signed already without even talking to the Angels? That's what I don't understand. Like, is he still looking for a 5-6 year deal? Because remember, that 3-year deal was an exclusive Mets offer or exclusive Pete Alonso offer to the Mets. It wasn't to any other team. So maybe he's asking the Blue Jays or the Angels for 5-6 years.
So at this point, you don't think that? So I'll say this, with what Martino said, with what Tim Healy said, and how close they made it seem, do you not think that the Blue Jays at this point have an offer on the table to Pete Alonso?
Yes, but either similar to the Mets or a little less. Because I think if he would have got the 4th year, he would have signed. Because I'm telling you this right now, I don't think the Blue Jays are going to go higher than the Mets AAV. I think they'll give him. You don't think so? Year. No, I think the 4th year, because they're not desperate to get Pete Alonso. Like, that's the thing that people don't understand. They have Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who they're talking with extension talks. You don't think Vladimir Guerrero is telling him, why are you bringing in Pete Alonso? Yeah, he might be a good hitter, but again, he's playing my position. How about going after Alex Bregman? If you're going to move me to third base, get Alex Bregman to play third base, right? Doesn't that make more sense for Toronto?
No, that would.
You see what I'm saying? Like, the fit doesn't make sense. Like, Chris, if we're going into negotiations and you're a free agent after this year, I'm trying to extend you, but I'm trying to possibly get your replacement in Pete Alonso, and now I'm trying to lowball you with an extension offer, and you're like, what are you doing? Like, you got my replacement, so you're clearly not going to go to the 400 plus that I want you to go for an extension. So you're already getting my replacement. So why should I give you any type of deal? So that extension has not happened. And that situation that you talked about, that I think Toronto, if they're really serious, they're going to give Pete Alonso a 4-year deal or more, they're trading Vladimir Guerrero Jr. It just seems like the likely scenario. I don't see how anybody would be happy in that scenario at all.
Well, something to also consider in this whole conversation, if you think Pete Alonso's coming back or not, is that SNY just tweeted it out. I think someone in my chat pointed it out earlier before we even started the stream. I'm reading it right here on my phone. The Mets have reportedly told Brett Batty and Mark Vientos to work on first base drills this offseason. That's what they told both Batty and Vientos.
So, yeah, and I read that too. And I do wonder, did they tell him this early on, or did they just tell him this? Because that's key. Right?
That's key.
Because they said this offseason, right? In the offseason, this could have been 2 months ago, right? When the season was over, because of the possibility of Pete Alonso possibly leaving. Like, if it was
early in the new year. So in 2025, they told him.
It was right before they offered him a contract. So it was kind of like, okay, let's see what happens with Pete Alonso. So they're planning, which they should be doing. They wouldn't be doing their job. So in the new year, they said, take some reps at first base for 2 of those guys. Understandable. So I don't know. Like, in my opinion, at this point, if I'm the Mets, I'd pull the freaking offer and just move on completely. Because what they're doing right now, I think Pete Alonso is trying to get a few more $1 million, even if they can't get that 4th year from the Mets, a few more $1 million from the Mets. And that's what I think Scott Boras is doing. That's what I think it is at this point. Because again, if there was something much more pleasing to Pete Alonso when it comes to the Blue Jays offer, or even if they didn't offer him, I still believe that if it's the Blue Jays, Angels, or another team, it's going to be a 4+ year deal. Because again, Why would he offer the Mets an exclusive 3-year deal and wouldn't offer it to other teams? Because he doesn't want to go somewhere else for 3 years and have an opt-out. It doesn't make sense for him. And then you're going back on the market next year with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And who do you think everybody's going to go after? Like, I don't know. At this point, I don't even want him anymore. Like he's going to be crawling back. And now I want a player that crawls back when you clearly didn't want to be a Met. You don't want to be a Met. It's just a fact. I said this during the season. Pete Alonso is throwing you a bill of goods every time he spoke in a microphone anytime the reporter asks him, I love being a Met, I want to be a Met, blah, 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 all that stuff. Well, it's been telling over a year and a half how much Pete Alonso doesn't want to be a Met. They gave him a very fair offer, 7 for $158, which was higher than the qualifying offer at that year, and it was around the Olsen AAV. And then when Freeman signed, you saw it was like $26 million. And that's where he should be, in the middle. And then they offered him this contract. It's like, at some point, if the guy keeps on saying no, why even bother at this point anymore? Like, he clearly doesn't want to be a Met because he has enough time. He had enough offers on the table from the Mets and still declining them. I think they need to move on. And I think when it comes to our topic, when it comes to Pete Alonso, the saga continues because Pete Alonso and Scott Boras want to play this game. The Mets don't have time for that.
I just think that there's a very real reality at this point that the Mets are just planning on a life without Pete Alonso, and they're gearing up for that.
And that's okay. We will survive. I promise you that. So if it's not Pete Alonso, reports have come out that this one in particular, the Spencer Torkelson from the Detroit Tigers, the Mets have been looking at him, and also Ryan Mountcastle of the Baltimore Orioles. And again, both of them didn't really have really good seasons. Torkelson was a number 1 draft pick. He had a great 2023, but really didn't have a good season last year. Mountcastle was hurt for a lot of the year last year, didn't have a good season. If this is your stopgap for a year, and maybe you get a nice year out of a player, and again, people are obsessed with how are you going to replace the Pete Alonso production? You can't look at it just by one player, and that's the fact. Because again, Mountcastle and Torkelson, even if they're better than last year and can hit you 20 home runs, 75, and by the way, look at their RBIs, by the way. They hit 15, 16, 17 less home runs than Pete Alonso, yet only had about 15 to 20 RBIs less than Pete Alonso. So again, what did they do? They put the bat on the ball a little bit more, not the power, but they were still able to get 60, 65, close to 70 RBIs just by having less home runs, with the potential of them having home runs, Chris. And I put up a poll. A lot of people picking Mountcastle over Torkelson, which I think it's because of the name. People have heard of Mountcastle a lot more over the years. And Torkelson kind of he's in Detroit. Nobody really cares. You see Baltimore on TV a little bit more just based on them playing the Yankees. So you see them more. In your opinion, if you had to choose between Torkelson and Mountcastle, who would you like?
I'm taking Mountcastle as well. I'm going to listen to what the poll is saying. I'm taking Mountcastle. He's still a little bit youthful. I mean, what is he? I'm looking at the stats right now. He's 27 going on 28. We know Torkelson is 24 going on 25. I just look at all the stats from Ryan Mountcastle, and I just see consistency up and down the board. Home runs, right? I mean, he had one season where he hit 30 plus. That was in 2021, right? But he's right around 18 to 20 home runs. I know last year was a little bit down year for him in terms of the power category. But again, the doubles, consistent 25 to 30 doubles, which is what you like. Batting average is pretty consistent over the past couple of seasons. The OPS, I mean, that's been kind of up and down. I just like the consistency factor. And again, he's played in Baltimore, who, last year they went to the playoffs. It's kind of it's an organization that's still trying to figure it out and what the appropriate veteran to youthful player ratio is in terms of building a contender. I like Ryan Mountcastle. I'm going to take him. Has another arbitration year. He's under control for 2025 and 2026 before he hits unrestricted free agency. I think Torkelson is a great ball player as well. His defense at first base got exponentially better. Talking about defensive runs saved in that category, he went from -11 in 2023, which was a career year for him at the plate. I mean, I guess he's only had 3 years in his career so far. He hit 31 home runs in 2023, but then he went to a +2 defensively in 2024 while struggling at the plate. Torkelson, that is. When I take a look at just the Mets and where they're at and how much pressure and expectations this team now carries now that Juan Soto is in the door, I'm not quite convinced that I want a guy that's coming off of a very lackluster year and is also still very young. And that's why I don't think Brett Baty's going to survive under that pressure if they try to fit him into a starting role in 2025 for the New York Mets. So give me Mountcastle. He's a little bit more of a veteran. The numbers have been consistent. I mean, he's posted 100+ games in his career. Even last year, is that what? 120 games, 124. Yeah, he's been 100+ in the last 4 seasons. So he remains relatively healthy. I'm taking Ryan Mountcastle. Now, that is not to say that I don't think Torkelson has a lot of upside, but it still would be a work in progress. And I want to eliminate as much work in progress as I possibly can with the New York Mets. Honestly, I wouldn't rule out a trade that's surrounding, Brett Baty going to Detroit, given their need for a third baseman. I don't think it's going to be a 1-for-1 deal. I'm not saying the Detroit Tigers would do that because I think Torkelson's upside with the power is just that much more to offer than what Brett Baty has shown. But I would say that Brett Baty and maybe another, prospect in return to the Tigers could potentially land you Torkelson in a situation where he's going to probably be booted out of an everyday role anyways over there. Gleyber Torres is going to be manning second base, and then they're going to move Cole Keith over to first base. So that's going to boot a lot of his time. Is it in their best interest to keep him around? Now, the same conversations that we're having with Brett Baty is the same conversations that Tigers fans are probably having. Do we give up on the guy that is so young in his career when we think he has some sort of upside? The difference is that Torkelson actually showed them it in 2023, whereas we haven't seen it at all from Brett Baty. So I'm going to take Mountcastle in this scenario. I'm still a little bit skeptical if this report is true that the Mets told Brett Baty to work on first base and take some reps there. They also mentioned working on reps at second base. Can't see any scenario where David Stearns rides into the 2025 regular season come opening day and Brett Baty is a starter. I just simply can't see it. I can't see it, man. I refuse to believe it, I should say.
Here's what's going on with Brett Baty. Exactly what Brian Cashman did to Durbin with over the last year, that he started to, put his name out there, jump him up a little bit, saying, we can play him at second base if Torres don't come back or we don't get somebody else, right? Hyping him up, saying he can play this position, saying that we still believe in him and as one of our top prospects, right? That's what they're doing with Baty right now. I don't think any possibility Baty is going to be on this team. I don't think he's going to be the third baseman because you don't move Vientos to first base for Brett Baty. You're just not doing that. I'm sorry. This is just showing other teams that Brett Baty played second last year in the minors. Once he lost his position at third base for Vientos, he can play third base. We know that, and throwing him out at first base or saying that he's going to play first base a little bit or trying it out in the offseason, all is to hype up this player, right? David Stearns, which he's done probably in Milwaukee. Again, we weren't watching Milwaukee baseball and paying attention to their offseason when Stearns was the GM. Was he hyping up his prospects a lot more, right? He clearly did when he got Christian Yelich from the Marlins, right? I mean, we're not one of those players around the Marlins anymore. So we have to look at it in a lot of different ways. The fact of the matter is, I don't think Brett Baty's going to be on this team. I don't think he's going to be the third baseman. I don't think he's going to play first base, second base, anywhere. I think situation like the Detroit Tigers, this is why I think Torkelson is probably more likely than Mountcastle even though I like Mountcastle more because, like you said, consistency. Even though he hasn't played more than 145 games in his career, which is a little concerning, right? I'd rather have the guy playing more games than not, but he is consistent, right? 265 career average. He hits 270 the last couple of years. He'll give you 68, 70 RBIs, 15 to 20 home runs. That's what you're going to get from him. So consistency. But Torkelson makes sense only because, and my cat's going crazy. I'm sorry. He might just jump up in front of the camera. Sorry, guys. I think Torkelson's more likely because what was the Detroit Tigers have been linked to this whole offseason, right?
Bregman.
Exactly. And it looks like Bregman is not going to be heading to the Detroit Tigers. It looked like either the Astros or somebody else. So you said it. Where does Brett Beatty play the most? Where is he known to play? Third base. That would be a good swap. Maybe you have to give a little bit more because he's under control for a couple more years, Torkelson. You might have to give another. I don't think you have to give a top 10. You might maybe like a lower level pitcher or maybe a lower level position player. Nothing special, but Brett Beatty, who can step in for third base tomorrow for the Detroit Tigers, and give him a lower level prospect, and you could probably get it done, right? It seems like the Tigers are kind of in that in-between scenario with Torkelson, like you said, Chris, just like Brett Beatty and the Mets. Yep. They're in between. They don't know what to do. And Brett Beatty never had a year like Torkelson did. He hit 30-plus home runs. He looked like a emerging star. Brett Beatty hasn't. So, again, could you make that switch? Maybe they would, but I think Torkelson's more likely because I don't think Baltimore would. I don't know what you have to give up from Mountcastle because I don't think they would want Brett Beatty. I mean, they could take him. I don't think they trust Brett Beatty. Or you can put him at third base. I don't think that's smart for the Baltimore Orioles, to be quite honest with you, unless they're looking for something else. But I like Torkelson because there's a lot of upside. And I think it's more likely scenario that the Mets can get him over Mountcastle.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the easier path, it's hard to assess what the Orioles want or would need in a potential trade. So that's why I don't even want to speculate in that area. If you're asking me straight up, the type of player that I would prioritize, I would take Mountcastle. But I agree with you at this point from what I know, or at least what I think I know. A trade route with the Tigers would be easier because it's very clear and very evident what they need and what they're still lacking if Bregman goes elsewhere, right? So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm just going to say it. Neither of these guys are Pete Alonso. Even in a down year of Pete Alonso, he's still going to get you more valuable production. I firmly believe that. And it sucks to be talking about this because I'd much rather be talking about a world where Pete Alonso and the Mets see eye to eye. The value is there for both parties, and we're talking about an extension for Pete Alonso. But the unfortunate reality is that now we have to talk about other scenarios and, even beyond this season about, who could be out on the market next off season in addition to Vlad Jr. Is just a lot of moving parts. But, Torkelson would not move that mountain for me in terms of making me feel comfortable going into 2025, knowing that Pete Alonso is going elsewhere. Mountcastle would put a little bit of a dent in that sort of, I don't even know how I should say it, in that pessimism, I guess. Yeah, he's a stopgap at the end of the day. But Torkelson wouldn't do it for me. And I think the entire sentiment here is that I'm going to be straight up. I appreciate that the Mets are doing their due diligence. I appreciate that they are not overpaying somebody that they don't see as worth it to overpay for. And that's okay. If that's their assessment, if that's their judgment, that's fine. But telling me that we're going to have to rely on Brett Beatty, right? And Ronnie Mauricio at this point, given the uncertainty with his injury status, and hoping that Jesse Winker can fill in at some point, maybe at first base, that's not doing it for me. So there has to be some other pivot option, whether it's trade or whether it's a free agent. I don't know what it's going to have to be. But at this point, options are dwindling. And that's where I understand your frustration from last stream, that the Mets have put themselves in a situation where their options are now limited and replacing that production given who's still on the market versus who's not. And we still have a very big question mark on David Stearns in terms of if he's going to be willing to trade the prospects this offseason to get who he wants and who those prospects are going to be, like the analysis of that, which is a whole separate discussion. So I think the Mets are a little bit handcuffed, I will say, given the lack of options, but the entire process I can still appreciate. Again, it makes it hard for us to talk about because there are a lot of options, but no options at the same time. Because when I take a look at Santander off the board, when I take a look at all these reports stating that the Mets are not in on Bregman, right? The Red Sox, the Blue Jays, the Cubs were even named a team that to watch out for, and the Mets aren't there. I'm like, well, what's the next best move here for the New York Mets? And I'm losing some words. I'm losing some ideas here to throw out, to be honest.
Look, the Mets aren't totally at fault with the Pete Alonso situation because they offered him a contract. What they did wrong was let Pete Alonso and Scott Boras dictate their offseason. Because I said it for a while. Pete Alonso's lack of negotiation, or with the Mets with negotiations, has led for the Mets to hold up. Because again, as soon as the offer came out and then Pete Alonso declined, all of a sudden the Mets signed Manaea, the Mets signed this guy, the Mets signed a couple other players. And it seemed like Pete Alonso held all that up. And it seems like it's still holding him up a little bit. And I just don't understand why they were doing that. That's why I said that they deviated from the plan they thought they were going to have. They were expecting Juan Soto, Pete Alonso offseason. They were expecting, I wish you would give them Stearns and Cohen truth serum. They probably thought that Pete Alonso would have signed, even if it wasn't with the Mets, much sooner or earlier in the offseason, so they could either – they got their two bats in the lineup, great, and they can move on to do what they need to do, or they didn't get Alonso and they could have moved on already. Maybe they would have been more interested in Anthony Santander, because it kind of looks stupid you paying 4 or 5 years for Anthony Santander and Pete Alonso goes elsewhere for 3 years, right? You wouldn't look as good, even though I would be okay with Anthony Santander. But they clearly, that's why I think their offseason got straight a little bit somewhere, and it has to do with Pete Alonso. The Mets, whatever they were trying to do with Pete Alonso, they allowed Pete Alonso to start dictating their offseason. And that's where they went wrong. Because guys are coming off the board. Now we're talking about Mountcastle and Torkelson, when you could have had more possibilities of going after Vlad Guerrero in a trade, maybe forcing the issue with a nice offer to the Blue Jays, which I don't think the Mets are going to do right now late into the offseason. I don't think they're going to do that. So now you're talking about Mountcastle, Torkelson, maybe even talking about, hey, maybe the Mets could have been more involved with Alex Bregman. But again, Pete Alonso is still holding them up enough where they're not comfortable giving, any conversation to Alex Bregman or anybody of significance that you could say is a good bat in the lineup. I truly think that they messed that up. And going back to the Brett Batty playing or, trying out at first base and working out at first base, that also tells me that they're trying to hype him up, because where does Ryan Mountcastle play? First base, right? So maybe they would say, hey, Orioles, look, Batty can play a little first base. He's trying out. Maybe I'm telling you, that's hyping Brett Batty up a lot, in my opinion. So that's where it's at right now. I just think that the Mets put themselves behind the 8 ball, and they could have either just completely moved on, or they read the Pete Alonso offseason badly. Not the market, just the offseason when it comes to Pete Alonso, thinking he would have signed already. I would think at least a month ago. I would think somewhere late December, right before Christmas. And I think when that didn't happen, it locked them in like a little closet where they feel like they couldn't move on to other things. And I think it hurt them. I think it messed up their offseason. And they're never going to admit to this, but it seems like the route they're going now wasn't the route they wanted to go. And that's where I think they screwed up, in my opinion.
Listen, what I'll say is that the Mets are going to be okay in the long term if Pete Alonso decides to walk away. Again, I don't want to talk about the long term, though. I'm here to talk about 2025, in which how do you replace that production immediately? If 2026 rolls around, I'm feeling comfortable. If Pete Alonso is in a Blue Jays uniform or an Angels uniform, I think that they can replace that production come next season. But it's like, I don't want to be talking about a 2025 season with Brett Batty starting. And I don't think it's going to come down to that. I think that they'll find a stopgap option, that's not named Brett Batty at the end of the day. But that's kind of my concern level right now, to be honest with you, is how do the Mets replace that immediate production? And at the end of the day, I will say, this results, if Pete Alonso does walk away, it's both sides. At the end of the day, it's both sides.
Agreed.
The Mets aren't blameless, but neither is Pete Alonso. And I know that this fan base right now is very split. It's exhausting going on social media, going on X, every day and taking a look at, the pro Pete Alonso Mets fans versus the anti Pete Alonso Mets fans and seeing this constant battle. It's both sides at the end of the day that couldn't work this out. But I will say at the end of the day, the way that I fan, I'm not telling anybody else how to fan. The way that I fan is that you root for the team and the letters that are on the front of the jersey. And if they make the conscious decision, whether I agree with it or not, that's the decision that they make. So I've been saying it all along, though. I've been saying it, Rob, you know this as well as anybody. I don't think that we've seen eye to eye this whole entire offseason on Pete Alonso. Maybe even going back into the regular season. Yes, Pete Alonso had his struggles. I called it out. Right? I called it out on one of my streams mid-season when he couldn't hit a balloon if they threw it at him, right? But this whole entire offseason, I was very adamant that the best possible scenario is if the Mets end up with Juan Soto and Pete Alonso in this lineup together, especially if Pete Alonso is going to be taking a short-term deal, where the Mets, if he succeeds, could get out of it to pursue other options down the road. And now that we're in this situation where it's Juan Soto and there's no other bat outside of Jesse Winker, I'm like, Mets, David Stearns, come on, show me something real quick. Let me see what other bat we're going to have, because I'm not convinced with this internal route. I'm not convinced.
No.
I'm not convinced until I get proven wrong mid-season, the way that Mark Vientos proved me wrong with his fielding abilities last season when I labeled him as just a DH. That's what I'll say. I
said this on 20 hot stoves. I am not moving Mark Vientos from third base unless it's Alex Bregman. It does not make sense. Like, I'm not. 2025 is not supposed to be, let's see what this guy has. That's what the minor leagues is for. I'm sick and tired of that. Like, I'm sick. Like, this last year wasn't supposed to be an evaluation year, right? It changed when June came around, but yet last year was supposed to be the evaluation year. Unfortunately, you couldn't bring Brett Batty up. You couldn't bring other young kids up if you wanted to see them, because the Mets would have traded guys at the deadline and you would have had open spots available to see these young kids. Maybe it would have turned the whole thing around and Stearns would have had a better idea of how evaluating these guys, but he couldn't really evaluate except for minor league stats. I'm not going into 2025 when you just signed Juan Soto. You bring back Sean Manaea. If you really think this year is going to be, let's see what Brett Batty has at third base for one more year. So you're wasting a year of Sean Manaea. You're wasting a year of Juan Soto. You're wasting a year of Lindor, Nimmo. All these guys that you're wasting a year on, just does not make sense. Like, I don't want to hope that 32-year-old Nimmo and 32-year-old Lindor is going to be better than this year in 2026. Like, I understand what they're looking for, and they're looking for the 2026, 27, 28. They're looking for those years. But when you say that last year was an evaluation year because you were looking for 2025 to be the year you really are starting to be contenders again, that was their words. What are you doing? Like, we have to be past this evaluation stage. And by the way, Francisco Alvarez is still in evaluation mode because we have no idea if he's going to be what we think he's going to be. So we're still evaluating Francisco Alvarez, who is our starting catcher, right? That's where we are right now, right? Our second base situation, yeah, it's McNeil, but if it is Acuna, you're still evaluating him. So you're already evaluating those two positions, and now you're going to tell me Vientos, which is going to be an experiment at first base, even though I think he can be fine at first base, you're experimenting with three positions in the infield when you could easily solve those issues by just signing Pete Alonso, keeping the infield the way it is. You have your shortstop for how many years? Pete Alonso for the next couple of years, Vientos for the next couple of years, and whatever you're going to do with second base with Alvarez at catcher.
It's underwhelming, and this is why I'm inclined to believe that David Stearns knows this as well as anybody. I mean, I don't see what reason David Stearns and what ties he has to Brett Batty, so I'm inclined to believe until he shows and proves otherwise that he knows this and Brett Batty is going to be on the bench at the worst case scenario or at the best case scenario for him come opening day. I will not believe that Brett Batty stepping onto that field as a starter opening day until I actually see it with my own eyeballs.
We will know if David Stearns has a trade target, if not Torkelson or Mountcastle, somebody else that's a bat. It might not be first base. On the third base side, you talked about Nolan Arenado. Maybe it's somebody else we're just not looking at that he has pinpointed because he hasn't really made a big trade, right? Jose Siri is not big. It was a solid trade, but nothing special.
Yeah.
I still think that he has a trade in mind that is going to bring a bat in here that is going to be that second bat, if not Pete Alonso. I just feel that because, again, Torkelson, Mountcastle is not going to do anything for me at all. Like, it's a stopgap, and you clearly know what the Mets are going for is that's Vladimir Guerrero Jr., but it would be okay, but I just don't see them. I just don't see it. And if that's the case, Stearns better be right. With Batty or whatever, if he brings in Torkelson and Mountcastle, he better be right because you can't have a 75-win season next year and expect Met fans to be okay with that because that's going to be a huge problem.
Yeah.
And well, let's talk about the rotation now. Now, all of a sudden, the Mets are looking at starting pitching again. How about that? Right? Because I've said it from the beginning, they don't have six starters. Tyler McGill and Griffin Cannon can't be your sixth starter. And clearly, what the Mets have been looking at, they clearly want another back end of the rotation guy, a sixth starter. If they're really going to be legitimately going for a six-man rotation, you need somebody better than Tyler McGill, who's proved time and time again he can't do it for the majority of the season. He'll have a couple of great starts, and then he'll just fall off. Griffin Cannon, I think, is more of probably a long man in the bullpen and a guy that has a really nice arm, but I could see him in the back end one of the last guys in the bullpen as a long man that can go in whenever a starter doesn't have it. That's what I can see. So today, a lot of teams, not today, but it was reported that a lot of teams were watching the workout of Max Scherzer. I think it was in California or something like that.
Earlier this week.
Some performance center. And according to reports, he looked healthy. He looked strong. And there was a lot of teams, including the Mets, that were in there. It was the Yankees, the Cubs, the Giants, a lot of teams. So this is a situation where, and I told you this before we went live, Chris, this would be a situation, and I know people are going to hate me in the comments.
Oh, yeah.
Where I would take Max Scherzer. Why? Because when we had Max Scherzer, we needed him to be an ace. We don't need him to be an ace. You're looking at him for a one-year deal as your fifth or sixth starter. Can he stay healthy? I don't know. I'm not going to say yes or no at all. But when everybody still has the mindset of Max Scherzer, ace, we're going to put him in the number one or number two spot, which we're not. He's going to be a fifth or sixth starter. If you're probably going to get him for what? Probably the average price of a 1 year, $12, $13, $14 million, somewhere in that range. I don't think you're going to give him anywhere. I don't think you're going to give Montas type money. I don't think so. Somewhere probably around $12 to $15 million maybe, which is kind of average for pitchers.
Verlander got 15, by the way, with the Giants as a starting.
Okay, so let's say 1 for 15. Let's just put that out there. This is a guy that, if he stays healthy, can pitch to a sub-4 ERA. He did it for 9 games that he pitched last year. He pitched to a 3.97 ERA. If he pitches that, that's a win for the New York Mets when you're considering him being a 5th or 6th starter. Because anything that you get from a 5th or 6th starter that's less than a 5 ERA is golden. And if he can pitch, again, there is no sign except for being healthy. If he can stay healthy, we know he can still pitch because he's a pitcher. He doesn't need 98, 99 miles an hour to pitch. We've seen that in his later year with the Mets. He was still pitching somewhat good until the season went unraveled out of control in 2023 before they traded him. So he was still good enough. Now, not the ace that we were hoping we got. But again, if he can pitch to a 3, even a 4 ERA as a 5th or 6th starter, it's probably better than Tyler McGill. It's probably better than Griffin Cannon. What you're looking at now is what is better than what you currently have as your possibly 6th starter. The Mets have 5 legitimate starters right now in our rotation. The 6th at the moment is Tyler McGill or Griffin Cannon. Nobody can tell me, because nobody wanted Tyler McGill in this rotation at all. So don't tell me now that I'm bringing up Max Scherzer, you want Tyler McGill instead. Griffin Cannon, nobody knows anything about enough to tell me that you would rather have him as a 6th starter. At least you know what you're going to get from Max Scherzer. Is you're going to get a bulldog on the mound. He's not the same player as 2022 Max Scherzer or what we've seen him with the Nationals, but you're going to get a bulldog on there that is going to give you everything he has on the mound, not 2.5 ERA, but if he can pitch to a 4 ERA, maybe a little less, why wouldn't you do it for a 1-year, $15 million deal? If you're the Mets, why wouldn't you? It's better than Tyler McGill. It's better than Griffin Cannon, Chris.
Tyler McGill, I will say, as much as I don't like Tyler McGill, he pitched to a 4 ERA last year.
I agree, but Met fans tell me that they don't want him.
I don't want him either, but honestly, at this point, you know what I mean? If you're asking for the same production for Max Scherzer, why dish out $15 million for him?
Because I think Max Scherzer can actually be better than Tyler McGill. I think I see upside with Max Scherzer pitching better when he's not expected to be a number 1 or a number 2, when he pitches as a 5th or 6th guy in a rotation and you're not expecting ace-like stuff. We know what Tyler McGill is, right? He'll have a great start, and then he can't get out of the second inning. That's what he is. We know what he is already, right? You're not going to get any surprises from Tyler McGill. So at this point, yeah, again, Met fans don't want Tyler McGill. But I guarantee you, Met fans are going to say, I'd rather have Tyler McGill now over Max Scherzer because I'm giving you those 2 names. Because one of those 2 guys, like right now, Tyler McGill's your 6th starter. And again, will I be okay with that? Sure. But again, I don't see any more upside with Tyler McGill, right? I'm not saying, again, Max Scherzer is going to pitch you a 3 ERA or 2.5 ERA. I'm not. But even last year, when he pitched in 9 games before he got hurt, he pitched to a sub-4 ERA. He still has enough in the tank as a pitcher to be decent. And that's what you're looking for as a 5th or 6th starter. Somebody that can get you in a game where you have a chance to win. That's what you look for from the back end of your rotation. I'm not excited about it, don't get me wrong. But you can do a lot worse than what we currently have on the roster, because there's a lot of question mark in this rotation. And I think you can get some expectation. If he's healthy, I think he can be fine. That's all I'm saying. I'm not excited about it. I'm just trying to give a point of view of where the Mets are probably looking at with Max Scherzer.
I mean, I agree with you. At the end of the day, it depends on the money for me. Sure. He had 3 separate injuries in 2024. I mean, this guy is going to be 41 years old in July. He's already 40 years old for everybody asking. He's 40, going to be 41. He lost over a mile per hour on his fastball. I get that the Mets aren't really, if they sign him, you know, there's not really much production that you're really expecting as long as he keeps it respectable. But still, even the availability is something that I value, right? I value that.
That's why I
And
don't want him.
and that's why it's just like it's a huge risk to even allocate even 15 million for a guy that's that age and has this extensive of an injury history over the past 2 seasons alone. Do I have any doubt in my mind that he can go out there and produce a solid season as a sixth starter in a bullpen? No, I don't mind. I mean, I don't doubt that at all, right? But there's other people asking about Jack Flaherty. You know, is he willing to take a short-term deal? You know, if you're paying 15 million for Scherzer, if you're not going to go the Pete Alonso route, maybe reach into your pocket, $10 million more, $25 million annually for Jack Flaherty. Maybe that lands you him. I don't know. There's a lot of different compare and contrast you can make here. I just have a bad feeling. And just this whole running it back with similar players. You know, how did Max Scherzer leave this organization when he was traded to Texas? He was not happy with the Mets organization and how it how it all fell apart and how it came together with him getting traded.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's going to keep the Mets away from a reunion. This doesn't smell like a David Stearns move to me, though. This doesn't smell like a David Stearns move to me. You know what I mean? It doesn't. It doesn't.
I don't know. I don't know. When you're looking at a 5th to 6th starter, I think everything's on the table when it comes to David Stearns, to be quite honest with you.
Listen, you know what? If at the end of the day, is it something that I'm going to be completely, losing, my mind over? No. I mean, I agree with you. It wouldn't move any mountains for me, but it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to stack. I almost said the word dependable. Which is exactly what Max Scherzer isn't at this point in his career. But on the other hand, like we know the clubhouse at least likes Max Scherzer. There's a lot of players in the clubhouse that was just like upset that they traded him. I think Brandon Nimmo was the first guy to be like, what the hell, in the lost 2023 season when they finally did it. But I don't know, man. I get bad vibes for the Mets and hold on. Will Salmon, the Mets and Adbert Alzolay agreed to a minors deal. Okay, it's a minors deal.
Yes.
I almost was like, hold on one second. We have breaking news. No, listen, I don't know, man. I'm on the fence. I could see either side of this argument. I posted a video earlier today. I went into Scherzer's 2023 numbers. I visited his 2024 numbers. We went into the injury concerns. I mean, it's been everything, a back, a triceps, a neck, everything.
Yeah.
I can make the argument for both sides, right? Yes, the production could be there as a sixth starter, but if we're asking, and if your definition of what his production and his expectation for production is going to be, Rob, in terms of just producing a flat 4.00 ERA, I mean, I think Tyler McGill could at least do that. And I've been one of the guys that has been, on Tyler McGill's case and how I don't want to see him any longer. But if it's $15 million per, I even think that's getting too expensive for Max Scherzer at that point.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, I'm never excited about Tyler McGill, but again, it can be you and a lot of Met fans don't want to see Tyler McGill at all, right? And I'm included in that. But again, it's just we don't know what David Stearns is thinking with this. Again, did he get Griffin Cannon to be the sixth starter? Tyler McGill's already on this team. Does he not like him? Right? That's other possibilities as well. And this is why we got to talk about Jack Flaherty, because he had something to say about the Dodgers and, that they're not bad for baseball. And then he talked about he has no idea why he's not more sought after in the free agent market when he had a decent, really good postseason.
Yeah.
He came back, he didn't have a great year, but in the postseason, he was very good.
He had a pretty decent year, I'll say. You don't think so?
Yeah, I think so. I think potentially he should have been better with his potential, but he had a decent season, right? I think you can do a lot worse. If Flaherty's willing to take a short-term deal, which it seems like it's probably more likely than a month ago. If you're going to give 1 year, $15 million to Max Scherzer, I'm not saying Flaherty's going to take a 1 year deal, a prove-it deal. I don't think he will. But if you give him 2 years, I don't know, $40 million with an opt-out after the first year, that's $20 million a year. Because Verlander got 15. I think he's worth $5 million more than Justin Verlander, because I think Flaherty, you can throw him right into that number 3 spot in the rotation, in my opinion. Like, that's a middle of the rotation guy, no problem, with the potential of him being a top 2 guy. Like, he can have that potential. I'd rather do that. Like, Jack Flaherty makes a lot of sense short term. You're not giving him 5-6 year deal, and I think that's more up in that alley where David Stearns likes. But again, is Flaherty willing to take a short-term deal? We still don't know that yet. Is he still looking for that long-term deal? He's one of the last, I would say, top-tier pitchers on the market, I guess you can say. So is he looking for a 4+ year deal? I don't think so anymore.
No chance.
Would he take a 2-year deal? Will the Mets be? What do you think he can get from the Mets? Like, he has to get more than $50 million per.
For Flaherty?
Yeah.
Well, I think even $20 million is underselling him, to be honest with you.
Well, yeah, I think so too, but I don't know what teams are going to be willing to give $20+ million even for 1 or 2 years.
I mean, but look at Walker Buehler and what he got from the Red Sox.
Exactly.
Jack Flaherty's probably looking at that and like, dude, I deserve that and then some.
With he pitched better.
He pitched better than Walker Buehler.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I think 22.5 is more of a safer bet. Okay. And maybe even potentially going all the way up to 25 for Jack Flaherty for 2 years.
I don't know if the Mets are going to do that.
Then that's what I'm saying. If it goes up to that price point, I'm not sure if the Mets are in, to be honest with you. Even though at this point, if you're not going to get Pete Alonso, I know it's kind of apples to oranges to compare the lineup to the rotation. But if you're not going to dish out that money to Pete Alonso, at least just go and get another starter that's respectable, right? On a short-term deal.
Pete Alonso, what do they offer him? Like, what, $22.5 million, $23.5 million, whatever it was per year? Send that offer to Flaherty. If you're going to use that money to allocate to Pete Alonso, give him the 3-year deal with an opt-out after the first year. It's the money you were going to spend on Pete Alonso anyway. Why not make your pitching a little bit better if you're not going to get that so-called bat? And then trade for Torkelson and Mountcastle. And now you have a better rotation. Your bullpen's looking pretty good. And now you can get a stopgap first baseman because your pitching's a little bit better. Like, if you're going to allocate $23.5 million for at least 1 more year for Pete Alonso, just give it to Flaherty. He can probably help your team and your rotation very well. And it just pushes everybody back. And now you don't have to worry about giving 1 year, $50 million to an old agent hurt Max Scherzer. And not worry about Tyler McGill or Griffin Cannon as your 6th starter. And one of them are going to be in the minors and one of them is going to be your long man in the bullpen.
No, I mean, I agree with you. It seems pretty clear cut, and like that is the move. But I mean, I don't see the Mets even making 3 years available to Flaherty. If anything, I could see 2 years with an opt out after 1, and just take it or leave it. And at this, well, we've been talking about all along, right, Rob? I mean, so this is what I'll say about Max Scherzer. It's actually, if anything that I take away from it, is that at least it's good news that they are showing a willingness to maybe make a move for another starter. So at least we know in the back of their minds, or in the back of our minds, that the Mets, if they find a value contract, and I know we talk about value and we hate saying that term because that's what it seems like outside of Juan Soto, it's been the Mets offseason is value. At least they're willing to add 1 more starter. I don't want it to be Scherzer. I'd actually, at this point, love for it to be Flaherty, even though he's had a pretty volatile career himself. I would take Jack Flaherty. He is the best option, hands down, in terms of the free agent market. Not trades, but free agents strictly. I just don't see them, dangling a 3rd year in an offer for him. And maybe he's still holding out hope for at least a 3-year deal for that protection. But I think if the Mets jump on any sort of Flaherty negotiations, it'll look something similar to Walker Buehler. And at that point, you can make a very fair argument from his side, from Flaherty's side, is that he outperformed, Walker Buehler by a mile in a Dodgers uniform last season. So he definitely deserves more. So You know what I mean? The contract and the structures, it's hard, man. It's hard.
Yeah, I've been on record many times. The Mets' downfall is going to be their pitching. I'm sticking to that, right? Even if the Mets don't get Pete Alonso back and they go get Torkelson on Mountcastle or move Vientos over to first, and God knows who they're going to put at third base, Batty, and I don't know. Maybe Steve Cohen will play third base this year. I don't know. But the downfall is going to be the pitching. And the reason why I keep on saying that, because it was the downfall in the playoffs last year when it mattered the most. It was. Because after Manaea, everybody else was breaking down. And then Manaea in the NLCS just didn't have it anymore. He didn't have the gas in the tank anymore, which is understandable for somebody who didn't pitch that many innings for a couple of years. That's understandable. Like, you're setting yourself up for the same possible scenario. Like, who cares if the Mets make the playoffs if your pitching is going to fall apart and be gassed out? Because all these guys, again, we talked about this over and over again. Let's say Manaea is Manaea, what he was last year, and he can be able to pitch the 160 to 70 to 180 innings, and he's fine. He figured out how to keep himself, have that extra energy throughout the later part of the season into the playoffs. Everybody else, we have no idea if they can pitch that many innings and remain, have that gas in the tank to pitch well in the postseason, right? Kodai Senga, we have no idea. He was hurt last year. Let's talk about David Peterson. Can he repeat his innings from last year coming off the hip injury? We have no idea if he's going to be gassed out pitching this many innings again. That we're counting on David Peterson a hell of a lot. Frankie Montas, he can be an innings guy, but are we expecting him to be a major pitcher in the postseason? Because if we are, we got a lot of trouble. We saw what he did. He pitched well for the Brewers, but didn't pitch well against the Mets in the postseason with the Brewers. And then Clay Holmes, a guy who hasn't pitched more than 90 innings. This is what we're talking about here. That's why I'm concerned. That's why I'm fed up with the rotation, and I'm dumbfounded. Stearns saw this firsthand, what happened to the rotation. I can care less how well they pitched. Until when they got to the point of no return, and the Mets had opportunities at the deadline to go get a Blake Snell or go get a better pitcher, and they decided to get a back into the rotation guy that there was no way Blackburn was going to be pitching in any of the games until they got to the NLCS. And that doesn't spill confidence, in my opinion. We're looking at a rotation that is already on a limits in it, most likely. They can tell you all they want that these guys aren't on innings limit. Every one of these guys are, probably except Manaea. They might have to push them, but you're going to push guys that haven't done it in a while or ever in their career and expect me to say, oh, well, hey, look, all these guys can have bounce back seasons. But when it comes to September and October, are they going to still pitch as well as they possibly could during the season into the playoffs? Because isn't that what we're talking about here? We're talking about the playoffs. We have to make the playoffs. It's a disaster. And just a bad situation if the Mets don't make the playoffs. So, Chris, I don't know. I don't know what they're doing with this rotation. I'm not excited about the rotation at all. Flaherty will make me feel a little bit better, which I don't think it's still enough. That's why, firsthand, we saw it in the playoffs last year. David Stearns saw it. And I know he's not big on long-term deals with pitchers, but there was guys out there that could have solidified your rotation and bring back Manaea. You would have had a 1-2 you wouldn't have to worry about. And your 3, if anybody stepped up, can be your number 3 in Peterson or Senga. And you just have too many question marks. And we're going to be talking about trying to get pitching at the deadline. And are we willing to do it? Because we still don't know. That's my biggest concern.
You're valid in your concern. I think we've probably said this 5,000 times on our hot stoves throughout the course of this offseason. It's still kind of, it's uneasy for us to even still be in this position. But at this point, what else can we say, Rob? What else can we say? I don't really have much else to add on to that because we've both stated this. I mean, we know this rotation is a question mark. Last season in the offseason, when they had the rotation on paper, even with Senga before the injury news came out, I said it was a question mark with what they had on paper. And they got super production, like super production from Severino, from Manaya, from Quintana after he actually figured it out, from Peterson when he came back out from the hip injury, and to try to catch that sort of lightning in a bottle 2 years in a row with what the names on paper are is a little bit of a bold move if you're David Stearns. We'll see if it pays off. I don't doubt that Kodai Senga, if healthy, huge if, but if healthy, is going to help this rotation by a long shot. But we're talking about a lot of ifs. You're right. And, me being somewhat optimistic on this team, I still think they're going to be a playoff team. I also share your concerns with this rotation. It's anything but sure at this point with the names that we have.
Yeah.
At this point, we haven't really seen the Mets being willing to add on to the rotation, right? We've heard some rumblings. It doesn't make sense to us, but at the end of the day, let's see if the Mets catch lightning in a bottle twice with the names on paper, just like they did last season. And
yeah,
I thought the pitching, the beginning of the season, when the Mets started off, 0-5? I'm like, this offense will come around. And we were even talking about the offense coming around sometime late May, early June, definitely mid-June, right? And we knew it was going to. But my whole concern, and I remember distinctly when we were doing our, either the roundtable or we were doing, the pregame or postgame shows, you asked me vividly, going into the second half of the season, what was your biggest concern with that Mets squad? And I said, the starting pitching. Are they going to hold up like they did in the first half for the second half? And guess what they did? And they made a deep postseason run. It's very curious to me if they can do it twice in a row. It's not the same personnel, and I'll acknowledge that, but just the philosophy in that.
But even if it does happen again, and the pitching labs works wonders once again, what the pitching lab clearly can't do is add gas to their gas tank later in the season into the postseason. Like that, the lab can't fix that. They can change the mechanics. They can show what the pitch, maybe change whatever they need to change to be good. But it doesn't help them with the energy they might need late in the year into October. Like it failed last year. Like we forget that. Just because they miraculously made to the NLCS, we're acting like it was a success when it was a failure. The pitching rotation was a failure because when it mattered the most and they needed somebody to another guy other than Manaya to step up, nobody did. Severino broke down. Quintana was, again, he wasn't going to give you ace-like stuff, but he was pitching well in the postseason. But what do you expect from Quintana? 5 innings, 2 runs. That was the best you can get from him, right? Other than Manaya.
I would label it a failure, though. That's a little bit of a stretch with how far they got. Yeah, but
again, because it was a failure because they weren't expecting to make the playoffs. I don't care what they said. They were expecting this team to be a complete overhaul the way they set up the team. We said it in the season preview. They set this team up to have a possibility of trading at the deadline. If they might be in it, they would keep the guys. But I don't even think they believe they would go on a run like they did. So when that happened, again, this is the reason why I'm upset at David Stearns and the Mets. Again, go through their history. They don't make that big deal at the deadline for a needed arm or a needed bat. They did it once with Yoenis Cespedes, and it was a shock to the world. And that got us to the World Series with Daniel Murphy, but it wasn't enough. And it ended up being not enough. And last year, it wasn't enough. They needed to get a top 3 starter in this rotation to help out Manaya and Severino, who were clearly breaking down. And because they had such a bad April and May in regards to the entire team, they had to fight the entire rest of the year, pushing guys to their limits to make the playoffs. And we didn't even have off days because of the Atlanta series at the end of the year. So we pushed them the extra limit because we had no other choice. And then when they got to the playoffs, they pitched well early on, but you saw, look at the numbers going deeper into the playoffs. The numbers got worse. I'm not saying they pitched badly, but it wasn't good enough, clearly. So, unfortunately for us, there is no doubt in my mind that we're going to be talking at the deadline that we're going to need a starting pitcher, because even if they're pitching well, we know it's going to come to roost that they're going to break down. Even if Manai is the only one that doesn't break down, it's not enough in the playoffs. Every one of these guys hasn't pitched besides Manai, Peterson and Montas, where if Peterson could pitch like he did last year, we're having a different conversation. But there's no guarantee that he can, if he be running on fumes at the end of the year for pitching 170 innings 2 years in a row. We don't know if he can do that. It hasn't been done yet. Montas can give you innings, but are we expecting him to be great? Even if he gives you Severino numbers, it's still not exactly what you need in the postseason. You need stoppers in the postseason. And I don't know. It's frustrating, Chris. And I think it's going to be our downfall. And when we talk in the offseason next year, and if it's the downfall again, I don't want to hear anybody bring up the pitching lab, because, yeah, we make the guys better, but for how long during the season? Because when it matters the most, who cares about the pitching lab? Because it doesn't fix what is the main cause, is they broke down. And the pitching lab is pointless if these guys can't do what they were doing during the season in the postseason, because that's the whole point.
Yeah, I mean, I hear your concern. I'm not going to go as far as to say that this is going to be the solidified downfall. I could see it, right, if things play out the way that it is. But again, I'm willing at this point, with what we've seen this offseason, to just run in with what we've got, and either we're right or we're wrong. I agree with you. At the end of the day, I agree with you. But I don't think what I will say, I don't agree with you that it was a failure last season. I know they ran out of steam, but I think for the expectations, they delivered and then some in terms of the starting rotation.
Sure.
And naturally, they ran out of steam to the inevitable World Series champions.
Sure.
But I don't think it was a failure. I will say that.
Well, that's a bad word, because, again, nobody expected the team to do what they did, but they saw what the pitching lab can't fix, and that is gas at the end of the year, having them have, they're running on fumes at the end. You can't go into this offseason and, yeah, you might expect better seasons from certain guys in the rotation because of the lab, but you're not fixing the main concern. And that's why when you get a top line starter that can pitch 180 innings, and he's going to give you innings and give you good starts in the postseason, and he's not going to break down, that's why you get those guys. That's why you pay those guys. You don't pay Max Fried to, pitch great during the season and not show up in the postseason. Same thing with Corbin Burns. You pay those guys because they're going to pitch well during the season and be ready to go in the postseason. That's why you pay those guys those years and those numbers, right? That's why Sean Manaea only got a 3-year deal and wasn't getting a 4, 5, 6-year deal. It's not even just about age, because easily you could have got a 5-year deal from Sean Manaea. But you know what teams don't believe in? They don't believe that he can probably be as good consistently enough, maybe for a couple of years, and they've seen him break down. Again, nobody can tell me that anybody in this rotation won't run out of gas at the end of the year into the postseason, because nobody's proven that. And it's possible that it can happen, but I'm just not confident at all. And I'm still not confident that David Stearns at the deadline is going to get what we need at the deadline and trade prospects if we need to. That's what I'm concerned about. Because this isn't a year, again, if we're in a hunt at the deadline, Chris, are you confident that they're going to make a trade? Let's say whoever the pitcher is, it's a top 1 or 2 starter on the market. The Mets clearly need it. You think they're going to trade 2 or 3 prospects for that guy? He might be on an expiring contract, and that's probably what we need the most. Do you feel confident they would do it?
If you're asking me, listen, I don't know what the situation would be, but if you're asking me if I'm confident David Stearns would make this team better and get that pitcher at all costs, I am confident in that.
I'm not.
I think that you're dooming this 2025 season a little bit prematurely.
I'm dooming that it's already setting up for them to need a rotation arm at the deadline, because no matter, even with the Mets having really good seasons from certain pitchers in their rotation, even leading up to the deadline, because they were pitching really well at the deadline. Their rotation was one of the better rotations in baseball, ERA wise, during that stretch. They still needed an arm. Everybody talked about it. And not a back into the rotation arm, a top line starter. That's why people were talking about Blake Snell and others like that. Like, even if they're pitching well, you're still going to need at least a top 3 starter. Like, it's just setting up for that. And again, I hope David Stearns does it, because I'm sick and tired of this organization. Wilpons, Cohen, Epler, Alderson, now Stearns, not doing what they need to do at the deadline when the needs are there and the players are available. Go get them. Like, you have a chance to make your team better. Blackburn didn't make us better. All right. He didn't. All right, let's be honest about that. A back end of the rotation guy that's barely going to pitch in the playoffs is not making you better when it counts the most. So if you expect this team to make the playoffs, if you think this team is a playoff team, then you need to do what you need to do. So when you get to the playoffs, the guys that you acquired at the deadline, every year we see it with the teams that go into the World Series, right? They acquire guys at the deadline that become difference makers deep in the playoffs into the World Series. Look at the last couple of World Series champions. Look what they did at the deadline. It mattered. Like, they got the needs, and even though all of them didn't help to get where they needed to go, some of them did. And the Mets spit the bit. In 2 years, they were postseason bound. They didn't do enough, and I clearly think it hurt them. And again, it is what it is. I'm still going to root for them, because what the hell else am I going to do? But it's going to be a year, I tell you. Oh boy.
I think you're going to be in for a treat. I think we'll be talking about this team just fine come the trade deadline. I will. I mean, listen, look at these people in here. I mean, there's a comment here saying that the Mets aren't even going to be a wild card team. I mean, come on.
I don't agree with that, though.
Come on. I know. I'm not saying that you do agree with that, but I mean, come on. What are we doing here? I mean, listen, this team, I told you all last Hot Stove, this team is better than what they were at last offseason. Man, it's just frustrating. It's frustrating.
This team is a playoff team. Like, I do. I think their bullpen's better than last year. I think when you replace
it's night and day.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And you replace right now Pete Alonso with Juan Soto. Your lineup is already better. Like, I'm sorry to say it is. Nobody might not agree with that. Now, adding Alonso makes it even better, but you replace Pete Alonso with Juan Soto, you're better. Right? Again, The rotation, whatever you think about the rotation, right? I'm not going to say it's worse than last year. It can be worse than last year, or just as good or better than I'm not going to say that, because I think last year was question marks along with this year question marks. A lot of things can go right. A lot of things can go wrong. But I just feel like they could have done more, because there was potential with all the roster spots available. Every need was available this offseason, right? You could see there's years where you might have had needs and there wasn't enough available out there to, fill those needs. Understandable. But there was needs in every aspect, every position to look at. There was needs, and you could have had them by just money. And you didn't have to worry about trading prospects for the prospect errors that are in this chat right now. So what else do we have to talk about? When it comes to that,
listen,
yeah.
What I will say, just to give you all some more information. I mean, at this point, I'm done talking about the rotation. Actually, you know what? I'm not done talking about the rotation. I would like to say something about the rotation here after I give you all this. Will Salmon, who broke this reliever that signed with the Mets on the minor league deal, Adbert Alzolay, I hope I'm saying that right, former Cub, 2-year minor league deal. It's a 2-year deal.
That's odd.
And I'll tell you why, because he's actually pretty good. I was just looking at his Savant page, actually.
Yeah, Tommy John, by the way.
Yeah, Tommy John last year. 2023 numbers with the Cubs were fantastic, by the way. He's a predominant slider guy. We all know David Stearns loves his pitchers with sliders. He throws it for about 48% of the time. And again, I'm just taking a look at, the breaking run value, the whiff rate, the strikeout percentage. I don't know. It just seems like another low risk, high reward type. This is the type of move that like you stash this type of reliever and he turns into like a Reed Garrett 2.0 coming out of nowhere, or Daniel Nunez 2.0 coming out of nowhere if somebody goes down in your bullpen. You know what I mean? Or if Sean Reed Foley goes down inevitably again, you substitute him with this guy. So I know we kind of broke it, on here. Will Salmon, 2-year minor league deal. We see minor league deal and we automatically write these guys off. But you take a look at his career. I mean, especially what he did in 2023 in 64 innings pitched in the south side of Chicago. I kind of like it.
When did he get hurt? Because I'm wondering, because if it was like middle of the year, he's not going to be ready until mid-season at best. So that's why they're probably doing a 2-year deal.
A 2-year deal, yeah.
If it's late in the year, he might not be available this year. And they see potential in him, so they can rehab him and, do workouts with him so they can have him for maybe late postseason into next year. Like,
that 22 saves for the Cubs in 2023. 22 saves. All right. Stacking versatile arms. That's what it's all about. People aren't going to like it because it's a minor league deal. And who is this guy? Didn't pitch at all in 2024. But
so he did pitch in 2024. He got hurt and had Tommy John in late August. So he's
what
not
did he post? Wait, actually, hold on 1 second.
Unless
so he's gonna. This is a signing for 2026 then.
Correct. Or
I didn't know that.
2025 postseason if he comes back with projections. So what
I jumped the gun on that then.
Potential. And I think they did this a couple of years ago with one of the bullpen arms that Billy Epler brought in. They signed him.
Who was it? I
forgot who it was. It was a 2-year deal as well. And I think it was a starter, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think it was a bullpen arm. It might have been. Maybe it was.
Well, we were talking about Brandon Woodruff being that type of guy. But it wasn't.
We were talking about that, yeah.
Yeah.
But it wasn't him. It was somebody that the Mets actually brought in. It wasn't a popular guy, but it was a guy that people knew that he had good seasons prior, but got hurt late in the year. The Mets brought him in. It might have been Billy Epler. It might even be Brody Van Wagenen. I'm not sure which one. But they brought him in, signed him to a 2-year minor league deal. They were supposed to rehab him, but he never got healthy again. And they eventually released him. So I forgot who it was, but John Curtis. Thank you. It was John Curtis, the reliever. So I think he came up later the next year and pitched a little bit for the Mets, but just wasn't good.
Yeah.
And they got rid of him. So thank you, Lewis. John Curtis, that was the guy. I knew it was somebody like that. But that's a possibility. Again, this is not a guy that is going to help 2025 most of the year.
Unfortunately.
He might be a late season to October guy that can come in and help the bullpen if needed, but most likely it's a 2026 grab. So again, not going to help us now. So everybody calm down. Don't get excited. But speaking of bullpen, Tyler Matzek, who is another one who came back from injury, didn't pitch well when he came back, just wasn't good. And he was another one with a workout that a lot of teams went to in Irvine, California. That was a guy that went to Irvine, California that worked out. He is a guy that was outstanding in 2021 with the Braves. He was their best bullpen arm.
Yep.
Down there stretching during their World Series run. He was their best pitcher, lefty. This is a guy that is easily going to take a 1-year deal. I don't know how much. Again, I don't know how the numbers work with these guys, but it's not a bad option. This is another lefty in the bullpen that can give you outstanding stuff if healthy. And again, when it comes to bullpen arms, I'm not concerned. You stack arms in the bullpen. The bullpen, I think, is already solid as it is. Adding Matzek to this, Chris. Now, if this is a guy that they bring in, but they could still bring in a Stanek or a Robinson, I would be on board with. I don't think you bring in Matzek and then that's it. I think you could be looking for trouble if he doesn't remain healthy. What is your thoughts with the Mets being interested in Tyler Matzek, who had a workout earlier this week?
I mean, it would be a Danny Young replacement from the way that I see it. And it's just like, who do you believe in more? Because the 2021 numbers don't lie. But I mean, I think he's also coming off of an injury, something of that nature. I mean, let's see, 2024 was not a good year for him. How many innings did he throw in 2024? It says 9.90 ERA, but we're
It
talking
wasn't-
about how many innings?
All right, let's see. So, left-handed pitcher for the Braves, blah, 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 had multiple injuries to his left elbow in 24. He missed the entire 2023 season, recovering from Tommy John. So we didn't pitch in 2023 with Tommy John. 2024, he had elbow issues. I'm assuming it was more scar tissue and all that other craziness. Again, it's similar to a Zach Wheeler, who didn't really feel right with his elbow the second year after Tommy John, and then the third year, we saw what he did. So, this is a guy that if he can be healthy, I'm not sure if he can throw as hard as he once did with these elbow issues, but you see the potential there as well. And again, when it comes to bullpen arms, I'm on board with anybody you want to bring, because a guy that had a 4 ERA last year can have a 3 ERA this year and be one of your better bullpen arms. Again, I'm not saying everybody's going to be Reed Garrett, but again, you got to stack bullpen arms.
Well,
because you never know who can be good.
Well, he had a respectable 2022 campaign too with the Braves, a 3.50 ERA and just over 40 innings pitched. So yeah, I mean, he's done. He's a World Series champion for the Atlanta Braves as well. He probably knows AJ Minter quite well, and that could be a nice little just take the Atlanta Braves lefty duo and bring them up to Queens in a World Series hunt. But you know what? This is basically Danny Young versus Tyler Matzek. I'm not really impressed with anything that Danny Young did. If you take a look at the splits, he was sort of effective against lefties. I will give him that, but it's not a guy that I would sort of shed tears over. So if they want to bring on Matzek, if they liked his bullpen session, then I'm all for it. It'd probably be a cheap deal. Definitely a 1-year deal, 100%.
Yeah.
And I don't really have much else to say on it other than that it's, again, I mean, I hate to say it because it just sounds so cliche when we say it all the time, but like low risk, high reward, it kind of is like that's what the bullpen, is.
That's
right?
what it is. Yeah.
For most teams. And you take a look at the turnover rate last year for this bullpen. I mean, we were talking about a season where we started off with having what's his face? Austin Adams for sure.
Yep.
Jake Diekman was the other one, and who was the third guy that kept blowing? Michael Talkin, right? And we went from that bullpen in 2024, which is crazy to think about, all the way fast forwarding, right? Yeah, exactly, and yeah, that too. But yeah, it's just one of those things where the bullpen, I agree with you. I'll take any arm. I'll take additional arms if they're willing to go on minor league deals and be in this farm system, because there's going to be an inevitable injury. It happens all the time, especially with the New York Mets, and they're going to need to have some reliable arms with experience. That's all I have on Tyler Matzek. Again, there's not really much else to say. Rapid fire time for you. Before I forget, I wanted to bring up this rotation piece because there was an article dropped. I forgot who it was from, but it was surrounding the Twins and the Padres and potentially including catcher Christian Vasquez in a trade for Dylan Cease. And I'm not sure what else the package was. There's no way that's 1-for-1. There's just no way. What I will say is that if the Padres somehow just have this asking price that is too good to pass up, there is no chance in the world that I am passing up Dylan Cease coming on board to the New York Mets via trade this offseason if I'm David Stearns. Zero chance. I know that he's a 1-year rental. I know that you'll have to extend him, but there's just simply no way. What would be my rapid fire question to you is, it's a really hard question. I hate to put you on the spot, but what does a trade for Dylan Cease look like in a potential return from the Mets to the Padres if they are willing to go down that route?
I feel like that takes time to have a process, but to quick think here, I don't think Stearns is going to trade any prospects, to be quite honest with you. So I don't think it's going to happen. I don't care if the deal looks beautiful for the Twins. I don't think the Mets are going to do it, to be quite honest with you.
Why not, though?
Because I don't think David Stearns giving up prospects. I don't believe it until I see it. He hasn't done it yet. I think he said during the winter meetings he's willing to do it, but again, there's enough trades out there that he could have done already, and he still hasn't done it. So until that happens, I don't believe in that at all. But I would say you probably would have to give a top 5 to 10 prospect in that range for the one prospect.
Yeah.
And also probably add 1 or 2 top 15 to 25 prospect in that deal. I would think you would have to throw in a pitcher. If you have to give it, a Hamill in there or put it this way. If they're looking at pitching, I would look at giving Jonah Tonga, and I like him. I think the Mets like him. But again, we're talking about winning here, right? I don't know what Jonah Tonga is going to give me in 2026. Sure. Maybe he'll be great and we get him sometime in 2025. I think the Mets are hoping Brandon Sproat might show something that can bring him up sometime like they did with Christian Scott. But I think if you can give up a Jonah Tong and another top 10 to 20 prospect, I do it in a heartbeat. But again, I don't believe David Stearns is trading prospects. I do not believe it. And I'm not talking about a 30-ranked prospect for a Jose Siri or, the trade he made last year for Tyrone Taylor and Hauser. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about at least a top 15 and higher prospect from 1 through 15. Until he actually does that to bring in better players, I don't believe it. So I think Dylan Cease is completely out of the question. I haven't brought up Luis Castillo in like 10 hot stoves because I don't believe David Stearns is going to do it. There is no reason why he can't do it, but I don't believe he will. And this is the problem when it comes that I have with David Stearns is that you can't keep on. You can evaluate your minor leaguers all you want, but we have too many of the same type of players that play similar positions. You got to use them at some point. You should use them for Dylan Cease right now, to be quite honest with you. I might piss some people off right now, but if you're willing to take Ronnie Mauricio for Dylan Cease, I do it tomorrow.
Oh, 100%.
I would do it right now because 100%. What do the Mets need more? The Mets need pitching. Let's be clear about it. They need rotation help. That's what they need. I will give up a Mauricio who's probably not going to start the season with the Mets, probably in the minors. And even if he's healthy, even if the Mets don't bring back Pete Alonso, I don't think Mauricio is going to be right up with this team right away, especially with Acuna probably getting the nod first. So I do it right now. If they're willing to take Mauricio and another top 20 prospect, 25 prospect, I'm on board. Let's get it done. Because nobody can tell me that Mauricio can have a bigger impact than Dylan Cease for this team. Because I think right now with this lineup, the offense will be fine. Even if you bring in the Torkelson or Ryan Mountcastle. I think your 1 through 4 is still pretty damn good. Even if you count on a bounce back from Alvarez or a McNeil, or even if Acuna gets the nod. The lineup is better than last year. It's better. And if they have a little bit of bounce back season from other guys that, like a Nimmo, like an Alvarez, you already have more power with the bottom of the order, with Jose Siri coming here who can hit 20 home runs for you. There's enough in there. I think you can combat that with getting Dylan Cease. Now, again, I don't believe Stearns is going to do it, but that's what I'd be willing to give up for Dylan Cease.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with the Jonah Tong.
Well, I'm trying to think
that. I would say Ronnie Mauricio. Well, I did see Ronnie Mauricio. There was some sort of trade machine out there, and they were saying Mauricio for Dylan Cease 1-for-1. I'd definitely do that. I made a Dylan Cease potential hypothetical trade on my channel probably last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. If you missed that, go check it out on the channel. It's there for your viewing. That package was 4-for-1. Blade Tidwell was in there. I forgot who else I had in there. The two names that we haven't been mentioning at all as it pertains to the Mets bullpen that we could potentially talk about in a future stream when we're talking about roster outlooks is Max Kranick and Cabrera. I forgot the guy's first name, but Cabrera, the flamethrower, ex-Cardinal, lefty. The Mets signed him, I believe, earlier this offseason as well. A little bit of a low-key move, but I just saw a video from Francisco Alvarez on social media. Somehow it got onto my feed of him, I believe, I'm not sure if he was the one catching him, but Max Kranick throwing a bullpen session. And we forget that Max Kranick going all the way back to last offseason, we were having conversations about him potentially taking one of the last Mets not bullpen spots, but the rotation spots. And before he went down with an unfortunate, I think, lat injury or some sort of injury that landed him on the IL to start the season. But Max Kranick, Max Kranick's the name to watch out for. Genesis Cabrera, that's right.
Yep. Or Genesis,
yes.
Yeah. So again, look. I mean, so Dylan Cease, get him, like, easy, simple. I think he should be either on Castillo or Cease. I still think Castillo makes more sense because of the control, but whatever, go get him. But again, I don't believe one bit David Stearns is going to be willing to give up prospects. My rapid fire is, I'm just going to, it's similar to with the rotation. Who is more likely? The Mets signing Max Scherzer on a 1-year deal or giving Flaherty a short-term deal?
I would say.
And who would you want? But that's an obvious answer.
Oh, I'm taking Flaherty. I mean, that's not really this. There's not really a question about that. I think more likely would be Scherzer, unfortunately. I think more likely is Scherzer. I don't want Scherzer at all. Let's not get it twisted. I don't want Scherzer at all. But I think if you're asking $15 million, right? Like, that's the maximum you'd go for Scherzer, comparing that deal, potential deal to a Verlander got with the Giants. I mean, I think the Mets would do that more so than give Flaherty anywhere between $45 to $50 million over 2 years. Yeah. Even though I would do that at this point for Flaherty, if that's what it took. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so, I agree. Yeah. So Brian said in the chat before we kind of ended here, if Stearns was to trade for Cease, my opinion of him would change by a lot. I think it would change a lot of Mets fans' opinion about him right now. Yeah, it would, because it was showing an attempt to actually trade prospects to get someone better in here. If you're not willing to spend the money on the rotation, bring in the guys that is clearly on a contract year. You're only paying him for 1 year, and just do it. If he pitches well, you have an opportunity to sign him. And it can be a stopgap for Brandon Sproul for 1 year, whatever it might be. But that's where I'm at right now. To finish this stream, I don't believe David Stearns is willing to give up prospects for anything, to be quite honest with you. Any top 10 prospect that we were talking about with Dylan Cease, Luis Castillo a month ago, I don't think it's happening. Like, I felt like when he said it during the winter meetings that he's willing to give up prospects, and that was just what the next day Juan Soto signed with the Mets. So I'm thinking, I'm like, oh, Stearns is going to be cooking here with this trade out with trades. Like, we all thought the best scenario was not signing Burns and Fried because of the money in the years. They were going to trade for a starting pitcher that was top line, at least number 2. And he completely went in opposite direction when he said that he's willing to give up prospects, but he hasn't actually done it. He talked about it, so he's all words, no action at this point. I just don't believe it. I just don't, unfortunately.
We'll see.
All right.
We'll see.
So there you go, guys. Again, almost 2 hours in another nothing happening for the Mets, technically. And we still almost talked 2 hours because more news has come out about Alonso, possible first base trade targets, Scherzer had a workout. Tyler Matzek has a workout. Both times the Mets were in watching these guys work out. And then when it comes to rapid fire, Dylan Cease, Chris asked me, I said, go get him. Trade who you need to trade. I don't think you go crazy, but I think you can get him for a solid, decent prospect package to get Dylan Cease. And I asked Chris, Max Scherzer, Jack Flaherty. Clearly, we all want Jack Flaherty, but likely, probably Max Scherzer. So with that said, guys, episode 30 is now in the books of Mets Hot Stove. Want to make sure you hit that like button, guys. Subscribe to the channels, guys. Chris got over 2K during this offseason. That's great. I'm on the verge of hitting 7K. Couldn't do it without you guys. Again, hopefully something happens to improve this team. It's already January 24th. We're a couple of weeks away from pitchers and catchers. And tomorrow, and I said this, Chris, before we go, tomorrow is an amazing day for the Mets, FanFest, and all that.
Yep.
I said this. I'd be shocked with all the noise that's going to come from these fans, with Steve Cohen in attendance and Stearns about Pete Alonso, I would not be shocked. You hear a lot of news into tomorrow night, into Sunday, about the Mets possibly Steve Cohen jumping in here and figuring out how they can get back Pete Alonso. I'm telling you right now, the noise is going to get very loud in that amazing Mets Day FanFest tomorrow. Watch out for that, guys. It's always a pleasure. Let's go, Mets, guys. Have a great night. Mets Hostel in the books. Chris, have a good night, buddy.
Let's go, Mets. Have a good one.
Dead at night, full of echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, but hearts steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene. Streets buzzing like a machine. Grimace from the shadows, chills on my spine. Past haunts, the future shine. Comebacks in the night.